Okay, hello everyone. This is a lesson on price ceilings. This is a portion of our microeconomics section of the course. So we're going to start with a definition. So that price ceilings are a government imposed maximum price for which a good or service can be sold. Now, we're going to look at the diagram before we go into why a government would want to do something like this. The diagram is relatively simple to draw. However, a lot of people still get it wrong. They get a bit confused. You'll see how. I want you to start by drawing a regular demand and supply diagram. So make sure that everything is labeled, including equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So pause while you do this. Okay, here is what you've done, I hope. Now, to make sure we draw the price ceiling correctly, we just need to think, what impact would a maximum price above the equilibrium price have? Let's have a look. So the equilibrium price is here and the government's saying, hey, no one can charge more than this. No one's really going to care about that because no one's charging that price anyway. And if they were, the price mechanism would just bring them down to the equilibrium. We know how the price mechanism works. So we can see that to be effective, a price ceiling must go below the equilibrium price. This is where people get confused. They want to draw a ceiling. A ceiling is high, so they want to draw it high on the diagram, but here it only works if it's below the equilibrium price. Now, here we've got a shortage. Quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied at this low price ceiling. We know this shortage would usually be solved by the price mechanism. Consumers would bid up that price until the equilibrium price, PE, is reached again. With a price ceiling, however, the price tries to rise, but it just butts its head on the price ceiling. It can't go any higher. So, let's have a look at the effect of price ceiling on market outcomes. So from a free market, we can see that the price is now lower. PC, it used to be P, price is lower. What about quantity? Well, we've got two quantity levels here, QD, quantity demanded, and QS, quantity supplied. Quantity supplied is the one that really matters here because that's how much of the product will actually get made. This is how much is available for consumers to purchase. QS is less than the equilibrium quantity in a free market, so therefore the quantity available has decreased. Okay, let's look at some of the consequences of a price ceiling. So we'll examine the market for rented housing in New York. This is where maximum prices have been in place for some time. Now, why was this implemented? Why did they put maximum prices on? They wanted low prices for the necessity of accommodation. They thought people need this, they need a fair price. It makes sense. It was done with good intentions. But what do we get from this? So I've used a picture from Friends here because rent controls were the only way that these two people could have afforded such a huge apartment right next to Central Park where they live. Now, what we do know is we know that producers receive a lower price with a price ceiling than under a free market. This can lead to some problems. Firstly, we can get low quality accommodation. This price control, this government control, is skewing the market for rented housing. Think about incentives. Why would a landlord improve his apartments? If he can't make more money in rent, then why would he outlay the money to improve his apartment? He wouldn't. He might make the repairs and improvements necessary by law or to gain a tenant, but the incentive to do more has just been taken away. And there are other incentives at work here. There's a shortage, so many consumers are willing to pay above the price ceiling to get their apartment, right? And landlords would love to receive a price higher than the price ceiling too. This can lead to underground or parallel markets, markets that operate outside the law. So how this has worked in practice, landlords break the law. They ask tenants for more rent than is allowed, or they invent charges such as a key fee. And that was a fee for receiving the key. So It's not part of your rent technically, but you might pay thousands of dollars to actually get the key to your apartment. That's not rent. We also know that in a free market, the market will clear at the equilibrium price. So the price will rise or fall to a level such that there is no shortage or surplus. The price rations the good or service. With a price ceiling, however, price isn't allowed to ration the good, rental housing. It has to be rationed another way. Non-price rationing often takes the forms of long queues or waiting lists, which aren't ideal. But a more insidious version is favoritism. If everyone is only allowed to offer the same price for the apartment, it makes sense that people would just give them to friends and family in the first instance. However, it can also lead to different forms of discrimination, perhaps based on race, gender, sexuality, and if they've got children. It can actually lead to the most vulnerable people struggling to access the cheaper rent, which works at cross purposes with the original intent of the price ceiling. Okay, we're going to look at another example in Venezuela, where ceilings have been put on bread and also other necessities, and the idea is to ensure their affordability. People don't have a lot of money in Venezuela, they wanted them to be able to afford them. So again, what we see, you should see this, we see a shortage. Demand is greater than supply at the price ceiling. Many suppliers are forced out of business as they can no longer make sufficient profits. So we don't have as many suppliers as we did before. The laws of supply and demand combine to make this shortage. Now, given the skewed market, is the economy now allocating its resources efficiently? So before price control, more resources were allocated to bread production. We know that because more bread was created. The market sent a signal to producers to make it in the form of a price. Now, the price mechanism just can't work, so we have an inefficient allocation of resources. And again, we will have low quality products. Why make the bread better if you won't get paid for it? With such a shortage, if it's available, it will sell. So why bother trying to improve it? We also get non-price rationing here. So here there's a limit per customer. This is Venezuela. Long lines to wait for bread. So here's a typical picture of a bread line. These people just, all they want is bread. Okay. We're going to look at how our key stakeholders go here. So what we've got here, we've got consumer surplus. Remember that. We're going to see what happens to that when we put in a price ceiling. So consumers both win and lose here. So let's see what happens. So some consumers win because they get a lower price now, right? They're definitely better off. Some people are better off. But some consumers lose because not everyone gets to receive the good. So less people receive it, so consumers are worse off in that way. So here we can see the effect on consumer surplus. If we look at producers, they lose a lot of welfare. So we'll see what happens. Look what happens to their producer surplus. It is now tiny. They receive a lower price and they make less of it. So they sort of get hit on both ends there. Now, in regards to workers, all we need to look at for workers is the quantity sold, right? Lesser quantity sold means fewer workers are required. People are going to lose their jobs. Workers are going to be worse off here. The government's not directly affected in terms of expenditure or revenue. We can't illustrate that on a diagram, but how they may be affected is by facing political backlash. So this is the president casting his vote. So people are going to vote against governments that do poor policies, right? So, so they get the political backlash, and they might need to spend on more enforcement. So here is a Venezuelan protester protesting the food shortages. No hay comida, what she's got there means there is no food, and look at all the resources that the government is outlaying here to fight the protesters, I guess. Alright, make sure you've taken sufficient notes on this video, that you've drawn the diagrams, and we'll go through exercises in class to make sure we understand. Okay?